Hello and welcome to the first of our two manufacturing debates looking at the future of industrial policy in the UK. With me are Lee Rowley MP, the Minister for Industry at the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, Verity Davidge, Policy Director at Make UK, and Brian Holliday, CEO of Siemens Digital Industries. Now, the purpose of these debates is to ask government, in the form of Lee Rowley, and the opposition, in a separate debate when we'll be talking to the Shadow Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds, for their view of manufacturing's role in the country's economic future, and for us to express to them some of the key concerns and priorities of the country's manufacturers, particularly, of course, SMEs, who make up well over 90% of the manufacturing companies in the UK. Verity, would you like to get us underway, perhaps, with your thoughts on the state of the sector and the priorities at the moment?
Yes, of course, and thank you. It's great to be part of this very critical and timely debate and discussion for UK manufacturers. At the moment, I feel like the sector and the members that we represent at Make UK are almost in this juxtaposition of kind of soaring domestic and international demand for British manufactured goods and services, which is a great thing, but also extreme supply side limitations that are seeing manufacturers really kind of struggle to maintain their production capacity. A week ago, we had the spring statement, of which at that point the Chancellor got up and made various announcements. Ahead of that, I think we were really calling on government not to shy away from the realities that businesses are facing right now. For us, so many of our members are facing a multitude of increasing cost pressures, from the soaring cost of raw material to snowballing wage inflation and, of course, spiralling energy costs, which I'm sure we will cover later in this discussion, and all of which could prove quite critical threats to industry. So our latest manufacturing outlook data shows that prices are continuing to rise and they are continuing to be passed on to the customer. And while the price of those finished goods are increasing at alarming rates, it's still not quite enough to offset the erosion of these operating margins and these costs. And as a consequence of that, actually business confidence is falling. And it's really disappointing to have to report that, because I think what we were hoping for and looking for is more building on those green shoots of recovery that we were beginning to see at the end of last year. I think what we're really keen to see from the government, and really looking forward to Minister Rowley's comments here, is, what can we do to help businesses get back that confidence and look to invest in the short, medium and long term. I think it's really key that we tackle these immediate challenges head on. Otherwise, there is a risk that they become embedded. And crucially, it will really hold us back from achieving those long-term ambitions that we know that the sector has, to transition to net zero, to accelerate digital adoption and create that critical kind of skilled and future-proofing that workforce that we need. So really interested to hear both from Minister Rowley and Brian today on this discussion. I think that for us, the priority for our members right now is to protect them from the costs that they are facing, and making sure that we can do something to help mitigate those costs, to keep those businesses afloat, so that we can actually pursue those longer term ambitions that we know manufacturing has.
Minister, you've been in post for 6 months now and have been on an intensive tour of the sector to understand how it ticks. What have you learned about the importance of manufacturing to our economy and to our society? And to what extent has what you've experienced come as a surprise to you?
Well, thank you, and thanks again for putting this on. This is a great opportunity. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be able to talk to the sector, and it's great to be able to have these kind of debates and discussions about both the immediate challenges and then the more longer term issues which have already been talked about in brief. I came in late September, and one of the things which I wanted to do was to try and really properly understand what was going on in the sector, to try and get out and about, to try and understand the concerns and the issues. They've obviously changed to some extent over the past 6 months because of the more immediate geopolitical challenges that have happened in recent weeks. But there's also a series of longer term issues which have been consistently coming through from all of the different manufacturers that I visited, from Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, all across England as well. I took the view that as a new minister coming in, I come from a manufacturing area from northeast Derbyshire. We have a historical, very, very heavy predilection towards manufacturing based on 40, 50 years of what we were doing. I have some fantastic SMEs in my part of the world. So I have a little bit of background in terms of manufacturing as a constituency MP, but I wanted to spend the first few months as a minister really trying to understand what was going on in the industry. And what's come back loud and clear is that there are some immediate challenges. Some of those immediate challenges are things that government does have a role to play in. Some of those are broader market challenges where it's very difficult to identify how the government can immediately fix something that's happening somewhere else in the world. They've been really useful and constructive discussions to have. And then there is this broader discussion about where we're going, about how we continue to support the sector, about all of the massive challenges that are likely to come in the next 10, 15, 20 years, and about how we make sure manufacturing is fit for the future when those debates really get going as they are.
Thank you very much indeed, Minister. Well, Brian Holliday, it's a great pleasure as always. Siemens Digital Industries are a very large player in the UK manufacturing sector. What preoccupies you most at the present?
I think, like most other manufacturers, we have those same challenges that Verity's highlighted of supply chain disruption, costs that can be partially passed on to the customer, and also just the availability of workforce. So I don't think we're any different at the moment in that sense. I do sense that we have an interesting view of the sector. We're perhaps a bit of a bellwether. 1 in 3 machines globally features a Siemens control system, for example. And so I do get to see both as a manufacturer the challenges we face, but also some of those sectoral challenges. And I think they're quite consistent around supply, security of supply, the difficulty of being able to guarantee a delivery, which means we're all adding to buffer stocks. Something that, of course, over the many years, as many manufacturers watching this will appreciate, we've been trying to avoid with just-in-time deliveries and low work-in-progress levels. So I think we're no different from others in that sense. But I do think that we're a resilient sector. We're quite used to change. We're globally, we have to be competitive, of course. And so there's always been disruption to the sector. It feels like a little bit more at the moment, but I think we've just got to double down and do the things that we do well, looking at leaning in our operations, investing for the future in plant and equipment and skills. And we're no different from others in doing exactly that. And I do sense, and we'll get into the debate here, a broad landscape of support measures that I think are there genuinely able to help. And I'm sure we're going to get to that in the questions that will follow.
So let's drill down into some of those issues and let's talk about growth, because that is obviously key to everything, how to deliver sustained growth in the sector. Minister, would you agree that a real focus on growth is the best way for us in the UK to guarantee a more prosperous future? It's not something we're looking at much at the present. To what extent is manufacturing key to delivering growth that is going to pull us, be the engine perhaps, that's going to pull us out of some of our difficulties?
Growth is absolutely vital to both our economic health within this sector, within manufacturing as a whole, but also the country at large. And what we are trying to do is move out of this extraordinarily difficult time and a very unique set of economic circumstances that we haven't really seen since the last large pandemic in the 1920s, and trying to get the country, as part of the broader attempts to allow the world to move on from coronavirus, trying to get the country in a place where we're motoring again. So growth is a huge part of that. I mean, the government published a plan for growth a number of months ago. It has the spring statement quite recently. A lot of the policies which have been brought forward by the Treasury are deliberately trying to encourage growth where we can, encourage people to invest, encourage people to expand. We know there are immediate challenges around that, particularly with the geopolitical situation. We know that there are more longer term challenges that have come out, or more medium term challenges that have come out of COVID, supply chains needing to straighten out around the world, challenges elsewhere in terms of movement of freight, logistics, etc., etc. Some of those we are seeing progress on, but ultimately the key point is we do want businesses to grow. Of course we do. That's how we ensure that we have a healthier, wealthier, and happier society. How we ensure that the United Kingdom is better positioned to be competitive all around the world. We have a really good story to tell as a country, and an improving and good story to tell within the manufacturing sector. And notwithstanding the challenges of recent months and years, I think as the Minister for this area, we want to really double down on that and try and help manufacturers grow as much as they can, so they can take on jobs, so they can take on people from a jobs perspective, so that they can ensure that they're out there selling their wares all around the world. And then that builds the sector continually and up further over the course of the coming years.
Verity, do you buy what the Minister was saying about the plan for growth being just that, a plan for growth, given that the industrial strategy that was introduced in 2017 was effectively scrapped?
Look, I think if we're honest, manufacturers will always be disappointed at the fact that the industrial strategy was scrapped. For them, it was a long-term plan that they were bought into and that they could see ambitions and targets towards. I think the plan for growth was a positive step forward. Obviously, we saw a massive shift in that it's actually owned more by Treasury, but we see why, because actually they hold the purse strings to a lot of the things that we want to see from government. I actually think for many of our members, they've seen more opportunity from the Levelling Up white paper, actually, because in essence, if the government really wants to level up, the sector it needs to be backing is, of course, manufacturing. It is based in all the regions where manufacturing wants to level up. We are creating the highly skilled, highly paid roles. We are investing heavily in R&D, and we are exporting into new growth markets. So I think when I've been speaking to a lot of manufacturers, they have said, actually, the Levelling Up white paper is the one perhaps where we see a focus for us. I think we would have loved to have seen a manufacturing white paper within that and a real set focus for the sector. But I think now it's actually, working with Minister Rowley and the team and the wider government to think, okay, what role can manufacturing play in achieving all these missions and ambitions? Because really having that strong industrial base in terms of a manufacturing sector will be really important for the growth that the Minister was referring to.
Can I just pick up on that before I come to Brian? I just want to ask the Minister something that Verity said, which in many ways actually may be key to a great deal of what we're discussing, which is that you've got one department producing the Levelling Up white paper, and then, of course, you've got your department, BEIS. To what extent is there a really deep correspondence between the two of you to ensure that your thoughts, and indeed manufacturing's thoughts and businesses' thoughts, are reflected through the Levelling Up procedure?
It's a good question, and one that we've thought quite long and hard about within government. We have a series of cross-government committees where I represent BEIS. I have the responsibility for levelling up within BEIS as well as manufacturing, so there's a coherence there. There is a strong and regular discussion about this. What the government sees is, of course, there is a particular department which delivers levelling up, but levelling up should be embedded in every single policy that we do. It is a theme, not a discrete policy to be done in a corner by a single group or a single set of individuals. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to look through a lens of how we ensure constituencies, for example, like where I grew up and where I have the privilege to represent, how they can make sure they're more bought in to the more broader growth and opportunities and prospects which we have as a country. So I think there is really strong government communication on this. We all went to, for example, Blackpool just a week ago last Thursday to do the first of what I think is going to be a series of discussions in the regions, actually getting government out of London so that we can see what is happening, in this case, the Northwest, or in future in the East Midlands or the Northeast or the Southwest, or anywhere, including the Southeast. And I think that's really important from a government perspective to do.
Brian Holliday, what strengths do you think the UK has that could be amplified, and what areas should be focused on for improvement when it comes to productivity in the UK?
I see incredible strengths in our university sector in research. We've probably got under-leveraged innovation, which needs to gain some attention, I think. But we're also very strong in IT, in data. And I think, if you look at the manufacturing sector, that's something that we could really build on, I sense in particular. The Achilles heel is under-investment in plant and equipment. And we've seen that consistently over many years, many cycles when comparing the UK with other countries. Germany had Industry 4.0, which was born out of a 2006 initiative to really build on strengths. And I wonder if we haven't seen manufacturing being seen as enough of a strength to build on, but we really must. We really must consider investing in plant and equipment and skills as much as some of the other countries that we compete with in this context, to make sure that we are as productive, that we do build resilience, that we are making this a much more important part of our economy for the impact it represents.
I wonder if, Verity, I could just ask you, because Brian's mentioned some figures there, the funding for the high value manufacturing catapult. And, we could be proud of an awful lot of the support that's going into manufacturing. But I wonder about how we stack up against competitor countries. I'll just say Germany, France, and Italy, for instance. They seem to have a greater level of both industry, government cooperation and collaboration, and indeed cross-party, a longer-term view, and perhaps more investment in manufacturing and R&D and skills. Is that a correct reflection of what you see?
Yes, I think it's always quite easy to compare ourselves, particularly to our European counterparts. I'm sure Brian has views on the number of times people compare the UK's apprenticeship system to the German apprenticeship system. For me, I think there is always lessons that we can learn, but we should also be very proud of what we still achieve in the UK. We are still, churning out some of the very best quality apprentices, graduates, and retraining our people. We're still massively investing in research and development. We are becoming very much the science superpower, and actually we are, I think, on par with those global competitors. I think it's really important that as an industry we continue to work very closely with government, and we very much welcome and support the ongoing engagement we have across all government departments. Of course, there is more that we can do. I think for us, we still are missing a little bit of that longer term strategy. A lot of the announcements and initiatives that have been made by government are very much welcomed by manufacturers, but when we think about the cycles in which manufacturers operate, particularly around investment, important for our discussion earlier on growth, we're still looking at those kind of 5, 7, 10-year cycles. So what we still really want, and what I think we can learn from our international competitors, is that need for that very clear long-term strategy that doesn't really become too significantly impacted if and when we see a change of government.
It won't come as any surprise, Minister. I'm going to reflect to you now what SME manufacturers have been feeding through to us because they knew we were going to have this conversation. And if I may, I'm just going to throw a few points out at you. Funding systems in the UK generally regarded as being complex, difficult to navigate, overlapping, not quite sure. So root and branch study of existing funding systems, perhaps to make them more efficient and thereby actually maybe even saving the government some money, at least make them more accessible. Focus on long-term productivity, just as Verity has said, 10-year plus cycles, not parliaments run in sort of 4 or 5 year cycles, and that, as we know, has impacts. New ways to make it attractive for patient capital to fund long-term investment, just as Verity was saying, and perhaps adjust public procurement contracts to make it easier for SMEs to bid, and build in a kind of social value calculation into procurement contracts. So it's not just price versus price, that actually there is an element of social and community value to be built into British bids for public procurement contracts. Now, does any of that make any sense? Does it resonate with you?
Well, it does, and there's a lot of really important points that have been made there. I think there is a general, I can't speak for other parties within Parliament, but I think my broad assessment is that there is a clear agreement across the parties that we want a strong and thriving manufacturing sector. Inevitably, within the very robust democracy that we are, there are going to be differences about how we get there, differences about the level of support which can be provided, and that is understandable and normal within the context within which we all operate. I think in terms of some of the specific points which you've raised, Brian recently fantastically willingly took up the co-chair of the Made Smarter initiative, which is a huge priority for me as a minister. And we've been having some of these discussions about the funding landscape and about what we can do to ensure companies can navigate through that and access support where they need. And that's a very live discussion at the moment. The feedback I'm getting from companies when I'm talking to them and going around and seeing them is that some of the newer initiatives that have come on, that process is simpler and is easier to do. But obviously there is always work that can be done there. And I know in government we are seeing what may be possible there. In terms of long-term productivity, I hope commitments and recommitments like the continuation of Made Smarter throughout the spending review for the next 3 years has confirmed our intention to try and drive productivity over the long term. And these really clear frameworks that operate more broadly, net zero strategy, the innovation strategy, etc., are demonstrating the direction of travel and where we want to go as a government. And then public procurement, again, a very live discussion, have to work through, led by the Cabinet Office, have to be very careful here how we adjust things, because ultimately, particularly from public sector procurement, there is a taxpayer at the end of it. There are people who are providing us this money, and we have to be very careful and ensure that we're spending it in the right way. But there is a recognition that other considerations need to be thought through within that, and that's what the Cabinet Office is doing. So I hope the people who are watching this today, I hope the representatives from the manufacturing sector that watch this will recognise the direction of travel the government's trying to go in. There's always more to do. Nothing is ever perfect. The government can never abolish all risk. Government can't support every single thing that people want to do. But I hope they're seeing a strong and clear commitment to manufacturing for the long term.
Minister, I wouldn't be doing my job properly if I didn't pick you up on what you said about agreement cross parties, about the need for a strong industrial and prosperous future. Yes, that may be so, but the thing that really bugs manufacturers is the fact that an initiative started by one party in government can be, and on which they're basing a great deal of forward planning, can be just ditched by the next government without their by your leave. I take, for instance, the Manufacturing Advisory Service was dumped in 2015. And then perhaps even within parties, the fact, again, that was, as mentioned, the industrial strategy, people were banking on that. It was done with a great deal of cooperation and investment from industry. And then that was dumped. I know you brought in the plan for growth, but as has been suggested, it doesn't have that deep-rooted feeling and nature that the industrial strategy had. So I'm going to ask you for a commitment, if you like. To what extent are you prepared, as a party, as a government, to reach out across parties to try to achieve some form of cross-party consensus on what a future looks like, and a commitment not to undercut agreed policies once they're in place?
Well, I mean, it would be remiss of me if, as a politician, I gave you a commitment that I don't have the ability to deliver. And the whole point, I wish in politics we were able to do that, but the whole point of politics is that you have robust debate, that you have the ability to change approach, that you have a recognition that when the people decide they want to do something different, that is reflected within the general direction of government. We all know that that's nothing new. So yes, I mean, in terms of, do we want as a government to make sure that there is a consistent and clear framework within which manufacturing operates? Yes, we do. Have we tried to bring forward a series of longer term strategies which indicate a direction of travel so that people are clear about our long-term approach for treading more lightly on the earth, about trying to ensure that we are very supportive of R&D? Only yesterday, for example, we announced some additional 3-year support for aerospace, which will go to fantastic manufacturers all across the country, and then a commitment out to 2031 to support the aerospace technology industry. So yes, I do think we want to provide clarity where we can. But I'm afraid I just cannot guarantee to you that won't change, because that is the nature of our democracy. And it is one of the things that we accept within a democratic system, that there is the ability to alter and change course if necessary, while still probably wanting to get to the same ends, which I think we are broadly in the same place where we want to achieve.
Yeah, okay, I take what you say, thank you. It's just that, as we were saying earlier, in other countries there does seem to be a more broad agreement on not changing boats halfway through governments. Never mind, let's move on, because you talked about treading lightly on the earth there, Minister. Let's talk about the transition to net zero and the role that digitalization, or digital manufacturing technologies, whatever you like to call them, Industry 4.0, play in that. Over 3/4 of manufacturers plan to implement a net zero strategy in their businesses within the next 2 years. That is a huge ambition. Brian, as the Minister said, you co-chair the Made Smarter Commission with him. The Commission's job is to drive the adoption of digital technologies among manufacturers. It's been at it close on 4 years now. Critical in achieving carbon neutrality in process and, where possible, in product. So how does the adoption record stack up against that big ambition? Can manufacturers deliver on the ambition if they're not perhaps adopting at the rate you want?
Well, perhaps I could start by saying how pleased I am to have been invited to co-chair Made Smarter with Minister Rowley, building on the great work that Jürgen Meyer put in, of course, as chair. We now have a programme that has it's gone through startup, and we're now very much into scale-up mode. It's really important because, of course, the work that Made Smarter does addresses particularly digitalisation, decarbonisation, dematerialisation. Experts that are able to go to companies and help them quite pragmatically with these problems, with advice, perhaps with grant support up to 50%. But I think specifically highlighting some of the art of the possible cases is just incredibly important. And I would encourage anyone watching this to go and have a look at that Made Smarter website and the case studies to identify what's possible with technology, with skills, with investing in the right areas of a business to become more competitive, to become more productive, and hopefully to become more sustainable. And this now is the real imperative.
A point I want to put to Verity, but I suspect it will. Brian and the Minister will want to pick up on this as well, perhaps. Digitalisation, the adoption of these technologies, they're self-evident that they're of enormous benefit to manufacturers. They should be, sort of biting people's arms off to buy them. Why do we still need Made Smarter? Surely the benefits are self-evident. Why are manufacturers not investing when they surely can see the benefit, as Brian just said, from the Made Smarter programme?
And all of our research points towards the fact that the majority of manufacturers are investing in some form of digital technologies. You do see a variation by company size. For example, larger firms are more likely to invest in AI, augmented and virtual reality. Smaller firms are more likely to be on their automation journey. It's about only 8% of companies that aren't actually seeing any benefits of using digital technologies. We definitely see a direct link between those companies that are undertaking that investment and are able to have weathered the storm of the pandemic and take advantage of new opportunities, for example, moving towards a net zero economy. We've also seen very clearly and very evidently in our research in that the regions in which Made Smarter has been embedded and rolled out, those companies are more likely to be in the revolution stage of their digital journey. I think in terms of the question around why aren't those companies doing more, there are two barriers that always come up: access to finance and access to skills. I mean, you almost ask any manufacturer what barriers they have to any issues, and those two at the top. I think on access to finance, of course, we've always called for the rollout of Made Smarter. We would have loved to have seen the super deduction extended further at the spring statement, but we have seen a commitment from the government to explore investment incentives so that when we're at the point of the autumn budget, that we're in a better position to set out what exactly that looks like. And in terms of access to skills, it's always been a major challenge. I think we're all in agreement that at some point in our lives we're going to need some form of digital skills, whether it's simply just topping them up or actually needing more advanced skills, which is why Make UK has called on government for a lifelong digital skills account that actually an employee could tap into at any point in their career. So I think for us, tackling those, they are major barriers, finance and skills, but actually industry working collaboratively with government, I think we can overcome them quite quickly.
We're going to talk a little bit more about skills in a moment, but Minister, if I can just come to you, to what extent in government do you think the disaster, the war in Ukraine, is going to threaten, if not perhaps even derail, the very ambitious net zero strategy put forward last year?
Well, we hope it won't. There are going to be, over the 30-year timeline which net zero is looking at, there are going to be some easier times and some more difficult times. There are going to be some challenges within our country, and that's natural within a 30-year timescale, and challenges with it geopolitically on a more global scale. It is rather, we are clearly looking at a set of unprecedented circumstances in terms of the first invasion of a European country since the Second World War. But by the same token, that we hope and we pray and there's a huge amount of work going on in government to try to support a resolution to that as soon as is possible, and for Putin's unacceptable and abhorrent actions to be recognised, called out and stopped. That will continue over the course of the coming weeks ahead. But over a 30-year timeline, we have to recognise that there will be challenges. We obviously don't want any more armed conflicts like the one that we have at the moment, but there will be economic cycles, there will be geopolitical changes, etc., etc. And it is about focusing on the end point and making sure that we continue to incrementally make progress towards that over the timeline we have. We've made really good progress already, 44%, I think, reduction in carbon emissions since 1990, whilst growing the economy by nearly 80%. So I think we can have confidence that we have demonstrated we're able to make that progress, and it's about, as much as we can, some years we will go quicker, some years we won't go as fast, to just keep that to make sure we have that target in mind and then making progress towards it on an incremental basis.
We understand there's tension between yourselves and BEIS and Treasury over funding for nuclear projects, new energy projects, and of course manufacturers are suffering, particularly those in high energy intensive industries, steel, glass, ceramics, and so on. They're facing enormous cost burdens. I'm wondering what you're saying to them at this time when they're wondering how on earth they're going not only just to stay in business and look after their businesses, but also to try to adhere to the net zero commitments.
Yeah, I speak to energy intensive industries and manufacturers on an almost daily basis at the moment, different groups of those. I mean, the first job of government is to understand. And so what we have been trying to do is understand what the challenges are. And it is clear that, particularly from an EII perspective, the energy costs are affecting almost everybody, but they have different circumstances and different challenges, different opportunities to substitute, different hedging approaches, etc., etc. So it is recognising that there is a diversity of challenge at the moment. It is also then understanding what element of the market may work out and what element is a more longer term and challenging issue which government needs to look at what is proportionate and reasonable to address, which is the place we are in at the moment. We have said that there will be an energy security supply strategy which comes out imminently, and so I would expect that to give a clearer direction of travel in terms of energy. But I would also say to manufacturers, to those who are eligible, particularly within the EII subsector of that, there are schemes already available. There is the Industrial Energy Transformation Fund. That is £315 million worth of taxpayer subsidy, which is available to look at how you can reduce your energy costs over the long term. And it's about looking at that environment, seeing what the opportunities are out there, seeing how Made Smarter, for example, may be able to assist in it if you were in a region where Made Smarter covers, and using those as leverage to try and move forward in finding a way to tread more lightly on the earth and hopefully mitigate and de-risk against the challenges which we have seen over the last 10 years from a global perspective.
Right, let's move on to skills. So it's a truism that if you get more than 2 or 3 manufacturers in a room together, within 15 minutes, as Verity was suggesting earlier, they're going to be talking about skills. I mean, if it wasn't bad enough trying to attract talent into industry before the pandemic, post-pandemic, it's proving even harder. Not just manufacturing, it's across a whole range of sectors. Verity, you've already touched on skills in the previous bit about net zero, but we all know that manufacturing pays better than most. Why is it so hard to attract talent, and why has the drive to recruit a strong stream of apprentices in recent years stuttered so badly?
So I think as a sector, there's always been, the image problem that we talk about, which for me is so frustrating. I've been at Make UK for 10 years, and the best part of my job is going to visit all of our members, including Siemens, to see actually what manufacturing is like. It's one of the reasons Make UK on the 7th of July will be holding our National Manufacturing Day, calling on manufacturers to just open their doors to local schools, local communities, and show exactly what we do. And I think we need to see more of that. There's always going to be that challenge of how we engage with schools. And actually, I think, it's for both parties, really. I think as businesses, we need to get better at realising what are the aims and challenges of schools and teachers themselves. What are they trying to achieve? And actually, how does working together help that? How does actually a manufacturer coming in to the classroom support what they need to do there? In terms of your question around the stream of apprentices, look, I think for us at Make UK, ever since the apprenticeship levy was introduced, we've been talking about it. I think there was a point when I was commenting on the monthly figures, every month to every journalist that wanted to know why the trends were going down. For us, it was always the principle that the apprenticeship levy was supposed to be a win-win for sectors such as manufacturing that were offering the very gold quality apprenticeships, but ultimately turned into a lose-lose because it became so restrictive on who you could spend it on, when you could spend it on, how you could spend it. Actually, it was a really missed opportunity. And we've been working both with the Treasury and the DFE ever since its infancy to try to make it work better. And I still think it has potential to really work and support those sectors such as manufacturing that are offering apprenticeships still really regularly. But it requires more than just tinkering around the edges. When we heard the Chancellor get up and say he will review the operations of the apprenticeship levy, I did a mild celebration, and then I slightly said, I've heard this before. And last time that we did a review, we just again tinkered around the edges. I think really talking about what we need from our apprenticeship system, including the funding in the long term, will be critical. And the companies that government should be talking about are the ones such as Brian's and such as the Make UK members that are offering these really best in show apprenticeships that we could all learn from.
Brian, Siemens obviously has an advantage of size when it comes to attracting young people into jobs either as apprentices or graduates. Do you think that there's an obligation on large companies like yourselves to work with much smaller companies in the supply chain to help get younger people experience right across it? Because an awful lot of smaller companies say, well, it's very difficult for us to attract young people because they inevitably are attracted first to companies like Siemens.
I do see that as a challenge, and I think obligation is an interesting choice of word. It's probably the right word. I do sense an obligation to do what we can, and that's why our organisation invests in virtual, work experience programs that have been signed up to by, tens of thousands of young people now, as a feeder to hopefully what will follow apprenticeship programs and degree apprenticeship programs. Yes, we do find that easier probably to attract people because of our brand as much as anything. And I suspect the same would be true for some of those other companies on the commission like BAE Systems and Rolls-Royce. But I think, big companies are taking this responsibility seriously to train apprentices for others, and indeed to try and find ways to leverage, the apprenticeship levy. That hopefully will become more of a training levy for the future. But hopefully we can, train on behalf of others and do more to make the sector attractive, which brings hopefully the overall level of interest in and applications to, jobs in the sector up.
Minister, you've heard the cry go up that there should be a more coherent approach to skills, education, training, and so on. But how frustrated are you that this not actually within your remit? It's another department of government with whom you have to work very closely to achieve a coherent and collaborative and comprehensive approach.
Well, that's. I'm not frustrated. That's how government works. It's the job of politicians to try and plug any necessary gaps to make sure government works in a more coherent manner. And I'm very happy for the sector to try and hold us to account in that regard. My focus on skills, I do accept the challenge from the sector that there is a challenge finding new people to come into the sector, that making sure that they have the right skills is paramount. My focus is on having that conversation. I want to hear it. I want to understand it. I want to understand it in the detail that it deserves. I was at a round table just a few weeks ago in Preston, and we were talking about skills in quite a lot of detail there. I only, in another sector, as a construction minister, I was in a discussion about skills in construction just a few weeks ago at a college in Northamptonshire, and I want to have those conversations and continue those conversations within the manufacturing sector as a whole. But I think if we stand back, we are clearly on a long-term journey as a country to rebalancing the discussion in education between academic and vocational. And I say that as the son of a vocational teacher who spent 30 years in our local Chamber of Commerce delivering MVQs and working through how you ensure that we have the skills in manufacturing and other sectors such as that. And that is going to take time. But from when I went through that discussion 20 years ago, when I left school 22, 23 years ago, and I didn't have the best careers advice, and I didn't have the clearest understanding of what the opportunities were. I didn't have the clearest understanding of the vocational versus academic differences and the great opportunities that both offer. I really do think we have come a significant way in the last 5, 6, 7 years or so in recognising the importance of vocational qualifications and recognising the brilliant pathways that it offers, not just in manufacturing but in other sectors as well. There is still further to go. I think it's a good sign that we're having a mature conversation about where we need to potentially look again at the apprentice levy, but ultimately it is about continuing to make that progress to make sure that vocational qualifications are seen on a par with academic ones, but also we just highlight the fantastic opportunities that they give.
Well, yeah, if I can reflect back some of the feedback we got from manufacturers, it very much accords with what you said, Minister. I mean, very ambitious program, and let's work on how to deliver it. But they say expand programs like Primary Engineer, which is a fantastic program, reaches children at the right age at primary school, reintroduce craft and tech skills into schools. Apprentice levy overhaul, of course. Support SME training via training and development tax credit. That's an interesting one. I hadn't heard that. And end the top-down prescriptive approach to skills. Allow businesses to tailor programs to fit their needs. So these are all topics that will enter the conversation in time. We're reaching the end of our conversation. I'd just like to share a sort of overarching thought that I've had listening to what the panel has been saying. And it is that sometimes government keeps hearing, give us money, give us money, give us money. And of course, there is a very real need for financial support at certain levels. But I think, from what I'm hearing, so much more could be achieved by greater collaboration, a greater understanding, greater working together. And actually, there's probably quite a lot of saving to be made if we did things in terms of government support structures and government partnership with industry, made it more efficient and made it more transparent and more easy to navigate. So on that basis, Verity, have I summed up? Would you agree with that summation?
Yes, absolutely. I think it is just continuing that ongoing relationship that, we are identifying challenges, yes, but we're hopefully also offering solutions, and one where we aren't just asking government for a financial handout. We are saying the sector could do even more, could recruit even more, could invest even more, could look at R&D even more, with just the continued backing of government. It's been really great to hear from the Minister and that passion for manufacturing. And I hope he also joins us on 7th of July for our National Manufacturing Day to demonstrate the government's clear commitment to our sector, which I think we've definitely shown today has a lot to offer.
Brian Holliday, some final thoughts from you, perhaps?
No, it's great to be part of a great manufacturing sector, and we know that we've got some disruption, some resilience challenges at the moment, but it's great to see even more focus from Minister Rowley here, from government for the future. We've got to concentrate on resilience of supply, we've got to concentrate on productivity, we've got to concentrate actually even more on saving the planet one factory at a time. We've got this imperative where we've got to invest in order to do better with technology that we use in our factories to reduce energy, to reduce material consumption, and to do better for the future too. So we've got to concentrate on putting the right skills in, having the right policy landscape, and doing the right things to make sure that manufacturing becomes the sector that we want it to be for the future.
Lee Rowley, I'm wondering what your thoughts are about that. I know as government, you're probably saying, listen, you've already said it during the course of the conversation, you can't do everything that everybody asks. But does it make sense to you that a sort of examination of the way the relationship goes between business and government might identify areas where we can be more productive and perhaps get more efficiency out of the support that already exists?
Yeah, I think the key thing for me is making sure we have a strong, robust, open and frank discussion with the sector. It is absolutely vital that we do that. There are going to be times when you tell me as the Minister for Manufacturing that we're doing some things right. There are times when you're going to be telling me that there are things that you think we could be doing better. That's normal within the course of events, and I welcome it. I want the challenge. I hope you will accept my challenges back to you in that same spirit of openness and frankness. But it is fantastic just to hear the feedback and to find out more, both on my visits, in my discussions, in conversations like this, hearing what you are being told about what is happening, so that we can make sure that over the medium and long term we have a great set of policies that are supporting such an important sector. Government is always the ability to try and reconcile infinite demands with finite funds and finite capacity. But ultimately, that is a challenge that we take up with relish, and it's a really important one that you keep highlighting the important things for manufacturing, and we try and do what we can. And I think we have a really good story to tell. We have still the 9th largest manufacturing country in the world. We have companies coming here to invest. We are seeing almost on a weekly and certainly a monthly basis that we are getting that foreign direct investment into our manufacturing base. And so I think, notwithstanding the challenges that we've seen over the last 2 years, and they have been difficult, and thank you for everything that the sector has done to get through that, and notwithstanding the challenges that we've got at the moment, I think we have a great future for manufacturing, and I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Well, thank you very much indeed, all of you. That brings us to the end of this manufacturing debate. Thank you to Lee Rowley, Verity, Davidge and Brian Holliday. In the second debate, we'll be asking the Shadow Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, for Labour Party policies on manufacturing and industry. On behalf of Manufacturing TV and Make UK, I'm Nick Peters. Thank you very much indeed for watching.